Dad tries to control my life, then insults my daughter's name choice, leading me to cut contact temporarily. Did he expect a different reaction? All right, prepare yourself for a lengthy read. I would like to provide additional context for this situation. My parents divorced when I was 3 years old due to my father's unfaithfulness. Prior to their separation, he had persuaded my mother to stay home with my brother and me. When she uncovered his infidelities, he forced her and us out of the house and completely emptied their bank account. My mother returned to our home state with both my brother and me. We slept on our grandparents' couch for 2 years until she could regain her footing and afford her own apartment. Regarding custody, my father wished for my mother to retain the majority. He saw us only every other Christmas and Thanksgiving, along with one summer visit. As I matured and became more independent, he suggested I move in with him, but not my brother, whom he claimed needed too much support due to his autism. He attempted to persuade me by highlighting my mother's drinking problems at the time. Nevertheless, I chose to remain with my mother and brother, as they constituted my real family. Additionally, I later discovered that his intention for me to move in was primarily to handle cooking and cleaning tasks at his home. He frequently criticized my mother, while she never spoke ill of him. She always worked hard to facilitate our visits with him, even going beyond their arrangement by driving us halfway to meet him, given that he lived about 4 hours away. He never attended any significant events in my life. I remember getting ready to go to a daddy-daughter dance at school, seated on the couch eagerly awaiting his arrival. Instead, he called my mother 30 minutes before he was due to arrive, stating he had not even left his house, and instructed her to tell me that he would not be attending. Despite his absence, he consistently paid his child support, a fact that both my brother and I were acutely aware of, as he brought it up at every opportunity. In summary, he offered financial support but was absent both physically and emotionally. I posted a picture on my private Instagram account, which neither he nor his wife followed. It was a photo of me wearing a lace over lingerie top tucked into jeans. Please don't judge, I was young and indifferent to others' opinions. The only exposed skin was my midriff, as the material was sheer but everything else was covered. Somehow he came across it and was infuriated. He called, shouting that I had to take it down, so I hung up on him. He then called my mother, demanding she force me to remove it. My mother laughed and said, "She's an adult, she doesn't live here. Good luck with that," before hanging up on him. He began texting me, accusing my mother of wanting me to take it down. I called her for confirmation and she laughed, saying, "No, you're an adult. It's your body, do as you wish." I didn't speak to my father for a period afterward, as he was far from pleased with me. Despite my relationship with him, I still kept in touch with his brother and mother, my uncle and grandmother. I coordinated a visit with my uncle for my boyfriend, now husband, and me to travel 4 hours to see them. Everything was arranged. However, 2 days before our trip, my uncle called to inform me that I was no longer welcome, without offering an explanation. My grandmother called me in tears, scolding me, which left me puzzled. A few days later, she called back more composed, stating that she disapproved of my lifestyle and would no longer communicate with me. When I inquired as to what she meant, she revealed that my uncle had spoken to my father about our visit, and my father had told him I was a stripper, which was false, as I worked in finance at a car dealership, and that my boyfriend was a drug dealer. He had been employed at a large hospital in our state and held a master's degree in psychology. I managed to clarify matters with my grandmother, but my uncle refused to discuss it, ignoring my phone calls. 2 weeks after our planned visit, my uncle suffered a fatal heart attack. After this incident, my father attempted to reach out to me, but I declined to speak to him, as he had taken what could have been a cherished visit with my uncle away from me before his untimely demise. As I matured, I attended therapy with my husband. We faced various marital issues, compounded by significant unaddressed trauma from both our histories. We dedicated ourselves to personal and relational growth. Eventually, we felt ready to start a family. After the birth of my son, my father and his wife were eager to communicate with us at every opportunity. He offered a half-hearted apology for his past behavior and stated that he would have to answer to God for what he had done, claiming, "Only God can judge me." We began conversing with them more frequently. We even traveled 4 hours to attend my stepmother's father's funeral, where my brother volunteered as a pallbearer due to a shortage. On that trip, I discovered I was pregnant with our second child, and we informed them a few days later. They were overjoyed, expressing love for our son and treating him with kindness. Upon learning we were expecting a daughter, my husband and I spent months deliberating over names. We finally compiled a list of 10 names we liked and crossed them off one by one until 2 names remained. From there, we selected the name Magnolia, planning to shorten it to Leah. We sat with this choice for a few days to ensure it felt right before committing to it, using it in sentences to confirm it was not too cumbersome, etc. When I spoke to my stepmother about our decision, she eagerly asked for the name. Upon telling her we chose Magnolia, she made a sound of discontent. Concerned, I asked if she was all right, and she replied, "Well, you still have time to change it." I reassured her that we were set on the name and inquired why we should consider changing it. Her response was, "I just don't see that as her name. It's an unattractive tree and an unattractive flower, and she will resent it as she grows older. Your father will dislike the name when you reveal it to him." I chuckled it off and said, "Okay, I need to go." After a few hours, however, I found myself feeling genuinely upset by her words. They attempted to call me, but I kept sending their calls to voicemail. Eventually, I answered later that evening, coming across as curt and disengaged during our conversation. After sleeping on my feelings, I texted them the following day, apologizing for my rude demeanor and expressing gratitude for their concerns, but reiterated our commitment to the name. They continued texting in our group chat, conveying their disappointment that we did not share their views. They criticized the name further, telling me I was making an emotional decision without proper consideration. My father also suggested changing the middle name, Benny, which pays tribute to my husband's grandfather who had passed. He insisted it referenced a drug and was an inappropriate choice for a girl. At that moment, I became very upset about the entire situation, and I acknowledge I was certainly rude, telling them it was unfortunate to know they would dislike their granddaughter as well as her name. I informed them that I would need space as their remarks had greatly hurt my feelings, and this was ultimately not a name that was up for their opinion. My husband was equally disturbed by their comments regarding the name Benny, as his grandfather was an incredibly intelligent man who held numerous patents, built his own home, worked for the Department of Defense, and was overall a kind and compassionate individual. We had considered the name Benny because I thought it was charming, particularly since we reside in the South where it would not seem out of place. I shared this experience with my brother, who no longer communicates with my father at all. He mentioned that my father had not reached out to him in ages, and the last time they spoke, he denied my brother's autism diagnosis, which had been established since he was 7. In conclusion, I am sharing all of this to seek input. Am I the antagonist for temporarily severing ties with them? I feel guilty, as it seems I am depriving my son, and soon-to-be daughter, of the opportunity to have grandparents in their lives. Story 2. Crushing on my lecturer at 38, feeling sparks but too chicken to act. Heartache for a love that never was WTF. Glowing broken books. I previously shared, then deleted, my thoughts on this topic. Even though I didn't keep the posts up, I feel the need to express my emotions to someone, even if it's just into the emptiness of the internet. Prepare yourself for the background story, the main event, and the unavoidable conclusion, or feel free to skip everything entirely. If you choose to stay, you can call me a coward, a weakling, or a fool. I embody all those labels. Alternatively, you could find humor in the ridiculousness of it all or commiserate, because we have all been foolish enough to fall in love with perhaps the right person, but let's be honest, the wrong person at an inopportune moment. I am a 38-year-old woman, neurodivergent with ADHD, though I was diagnosed only at 36, and I am a solo parent to a neurodivergent child. Additionally, I work as a high school teacher. I have been single since before my child arrived, which was nearly a decade ago. Also, I do not reside in the United States, but rather in a country within the European Union. Why is this information significant? Well, anyone who knows a solo parent and/or a teacher, especially both together, understands how little adult time one has to oneself. While I do have family and friends, a supportive network, if you will, who are my grounding force, carving out the mental space for more is quite challenging. This is to say that I haven't been on a date in ages, or even contemplated dating, or found someone I wished to date for a long time. To add to my already busy life, I returned to university to pursue a master's degree. Going back to school, studying, and being surrounded by other adults with similar interests to my profession was wonderful. I began to rediscover parts of myself beyond just being a teacher and a mother. During my time at university, events unfolded. My previous job was detrimental to my well-being. I experienced a burnout. I was a depressed mess and discovered I have significant ADHD, which surprised no one. I applied for a new position, obtained that position, and found my rhythm again. The new job, fantastic. My experience at university, fantastic. I am on the path to graduation. And then it occurred I enrolled in a class, not directly related to my degree, but we are required to take 2 elective courses. I was thrilled because a classmate of mine assured me that I would enjoy it. It did indeed seem tailored to my interests. That was when I first noticed him. In retrospect, I must acknowledge that his presence caught my eye and piqued my curiosity. Initially, I passed it off as excitement about the course. After all, he was the instructor, not one of my classmates. Now, it's important to mention that this particular class features numerous guest lecturers, so he does not even teach most of it himself. At times, he would remain during a guest's lecture. At other moments, he would not. Keep this in mind when I tell you that I began to feel genuinely excited about attending class and felt disheartened when he was absent. I did not connect the dots for weeks, not even when I concerned myself with creating cute but casual outfits. Not when I reviewed course materials, just to ensure that I could engage fully in discussions, and I could have participated without any extra effort. Not even when I would glance around the room upon arriving to see if he was present. No, it wasn't until I arrived late one morning and had to sit at a row of 3 tables at the back, only to find myself next to him, that I experienced a familiar flutter and sense of panic. I am never nervous around any instructors. This felt different. I attempted to avoid glancing his way. Let's be honest, I got distracted, but it seemed we were being prompted to look out the window he was sitting beside every 10 seconds. Then there came a class discussion, a topic to converse about with classmates. I assumed he wouldn't participate, but he did. This required me to articulate a coherent, intelligent thought. I was just relieved that I didn't utterly embarrass myself. But that was the moment I had to acknowledge, to no one but myself, that I was the 38-year-old fool harboring a crush on her instructor. He is at least as old as I am, if not a few years older. Then the self-doubt set in. Was I losing my mind, or did he smile at me a little more frequently than usual? Did his gaze linger on me more than with others? He must have accidentally looked in my direction when I glanced up, right? He couldn't have just asked about my seemingly random collection of books because that had to be mere politeness, right? The truth is, all of this could be explained as a teacher simply being supportive. There is nothing so overt that I'd ever confidently assume there was something more. However, it did nothing to quell my feelings for him. It made it even harder for me to concentrate during class. Then we received feedback and grades on our papers. To be honest, I didn't present my best work, and that's disheartening because I strive for perfection, especially when someone I admire will be reading it. Yet, I received an 83%, higher than I had anticipated. The feedback was quite amusing. It was evident he genuinely read and considered my submission. He mentioned some of the books I referenced were on his to-be-read list. The feedback was informal but meaningful, sprinkled with a touch of humor. And yes, everyone received feedback of this nature. It aligns with his approach as a lecturer and educator. I did take the opportunity to be a little playful in my response to his feedback by recommending a few other books that I believed would also be worthwhile reads on the topic. Sure, it wasn't outright flirting, but still. I was incredibly anxious sending that reply. Then I received no response. I didn't expect one, but I thought, well, that certainly confirmed it was all in my imagination. Later, while seated to take the final exam, he did thank me for the book recommendation. When I dropped my pen and jumped at the sound, he chuckled at me. Later that same day, while walking down to the floor where my department is located, we ran into each other. We chatted for a bit. He accompanied me to the floor I needed to visit, even though his office is elsewhere. I could have sworn that, after we bid farewell, or mutually wished luck with grading, which teachers always have, he turned around to head back upstairs. And that is where it stands. I have yet to receive my final grade, but there's no reason to continue any further conversation. No more awkward smiles in class, and I am too timid to make a move. In my mind, there is no way he felt any connection. For one, he is our lecturer, which presumably places barriers. Even if there aren't strict rules against it, he wouldn't view, yes, the very grown-up, students in that manner. Secondly, I don't perceive myself as the type of individual whom someone simply develops a crush on. I never have, and I have always been so oblivious to when someone has an interest in me that, unless it is undeniably clear and directly presented, I would miss it entirely. Moreover, it seems that the moment for expressing anything has slipped away. So here I am, left contemplating, feeling pleased that I am in a position where I am able to desire something more, yet left with a sense of heartache for something that never materialized. Heartache for a fantasy of what could have been. Perhaps it is the right person at the right moment, but my cowardly self hesitates. Maybe it's the right person at the wrong time, and I may never know. Maybe it's the wrong person at the right time, indicating that I should be open to someone new. And perhaps I am merely a fool who became infatuated with someone, simply a hopeless romantic who has magnified it beyond reality. That is the narrative. The entire absurdity of it. I do not anticipate any updates. I am somewhat convinced of that fact. Life continues onward and will become busy, meaning I shan't have the opportunity to dwell on it. I may even rewatch 10 Things I Hate About You and think extra hard about Mike tonight. Story 3. My best friends confronted me about my boyfriend's religion, then one announced her pregnancy. I felt judged and isolated. Hello, this is my first time posting on Reddit, and I find myself needing some guidance because I feel overwhelmed, confused, ashamed, and hurt. I have had 2 closest friends throughout my life, but in the past month a lot has transpired. We had a disagreement concerning my then situationship and now boyfriend. We are religious, and he is not, he is Muslim. My friends have been pressuring me about it, but I believe it is not their place to discuss it since I never bring it up or express any discomfort regarding the matter. We went out for dinner, and out of nowhere, they started talking about when he would make our relationship official, and if he would ever convert to Islam. We met in September. He also has a 6-year-old child. I explained that I did not feel it was my role to push him on this issue since it's not a problem at the moment, and that he should not convert for me because everything takes time. We have discussed it openly between us, and we are content with how things are currently. However, during that conversation, they spoke to me in a condescending manner, asking questions like, "Do you think it will ever happen?" And, "Do you have any boundaries for him?" This conversation struck a nerve, and I started to tear up and became upset with them because this was the first time they had ever spoken to me in that way. The discussion escalated into big fights that night, culminating in me crying and walking away. In the end, my best friend mentioned that she was pregnant. I was genuinely happy for her, but it is important to note that we were still arguing. They unexpectedly started recording and shared the news, which caught me off guard, providing a temporary distraction from our conflict. However, the comments made that night weighed heavily on me and caused me a great deal of pain because I felt that, for the first time in my life, I was happy. After not dating for about 6 years, I was finally experiencing something good. Even though he is not Muslim, he is open-minded, and we are still getting to know one another. I could not grasp why they suddenly had such strong opinions, so I chose not to communicate with them for about 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, I met up with one of them, and unexpectedly, the other called, asking if she could join us. I suspect this was prearranged by them. We picked her up and went out to eat. I found it difficult to pretend to be okay and did not speak much. They noticed my silence and inquired if I had any issues. I explained that I couldn't understand why the previous conversation went so poorly, and they showed no remorse, which troubled me significantly. I struggled to sleep for a week because I thought they were my closest friends, and I couldn't fathom how they could be so judgmental or say hurtful things instead of supporting my happiness. They continued to repeat the same points, which frustrated me further. One of them voiced her opinion on the situation, but I found it incomprehensible and hurtful that they ganged up on me about an issue on which I had not solicited their perspective. They insisted that my feelings of being hurt were unjustified, and that they could not understand why I felt that way, making me feel gaslighted and prompting me to suggest we end the conversation. Shortly after, my friend invited us to her baby shower a few days later, but my mind was still clouded with thoughts of our earlier discussion. I felt that the dynamic of our relationship had changed, and I needed space as everything else in my life was also deteriorating. On the day of the baby shower, the other friend called me while I was getting ready. I just woke up, and she chastised me for not attending the baby shower, stating that they had already been there. I apologized and explained that I genuinely forgot about it and that I had been working late shifts and dealing with personal issues for the past 3 days. Her response was harsh, and she yelled, "Nobody cares, you should have been there anyway." This caught me off guard. I was not trying to shirk my responsibilities towards them, but being yelled at for forgetting something felt unjust. I understand that it was an important moment in her life, but I am human and can forget things. I reached out to the other friend to apologize and express that, although there was no excuse for missing the event, I genuinely wanted to make it up to her and attend the next one. She responded that it was not her responsibility to remind me, and I agreed but reiterated that I regretted missing it. She stated there was no way to make it up, so I accepted that and apologized again. Not even 20 minutes later, they added me on FaceTime while in a car, inviting me to the gender reveal. I guess they had initially planned to do it without me but later changed their minds. I attended, but the atmosphere felt off. I tried to enjoy the event, but I didn't feel welcomed. Following that, everything in my life, family, work, relationships, and mental well-being took a turn for the worse. I took time for myself, reaching out to only my mother and boyfriend. About a week later, I spoke to another friend who advised me to just take everything in stride. Following her advice, I apologized repeatedly, even for things that were not my fault. I attempted to reach them, but every time I tried to initiate a conversation, it became difficult. I called one friend, and she mentioned she would call me back. Shortly after, she suggested we talk later with both of them present. I texted her to clarify that I had already spoken to the other friend but wanted us all to converse together. I mentioned I could have a discussion that day but would be busy after 8 p.m. They deliberately scheduled the call after 8 p.m. because the other friend needed to pick something up from my house. I kept texting her about it, explaining that I would not be available after 8 p.m. due to work commitments. Although I expressed my frustration, they remained indifferent to my situation and suggested that if I could not join the call, we could reschedule. I responded that I had canceled all my plans for that day, but couldn't miss work and had been expecting them to talk. I wanted to address the fact that I was sorry for missing the baby shower and for our big argument, as I felt attacked during the confrontation, especially when it was 2 against 1. They had never spoken to me in such a condescending tone before. After missing the baby shower, they continued to pick fights with me over trivial matters, which became overwhelming. I decided to take time away from them and focus on myself. When they asked if I had taken time off from my boyfriend, I replied no because I had been staying over at his place for several days due to family conflicts. They continued to berate me, with one of them calling me selfish, saying that the world didn't revolve around me and insisting that they did not want to hear anything about my boyfriend again, not even his name. The other friend joined in, agreeing. Their dismissive behavior shocked me, as they had never expressed such sentiments before. It felt as though they were waiting for me to make a mistake so they could unleash their pent-up frustration on me. I felt utterly incapable of doing anything right in their eyes, so I decided to distance myself for a while. Eventually, they kept trying to contact me, and I discovered I was pregnant due to the birth control failure. I felt desperate for my best friends during this time, so I found the courage to share this news with each of them separately. After informing them that I hadn't heard from them for a week, they both messaged me on the same day, asking about my plans regarding the pregnancy. The pregnant friend seemed more judgmental and was only concerned about whether I intended to keep the baby. During our call, she remarked that I should have closed my legs next time. When I explained to her that I was confused because it happened despite being on birth control, I was taken aback and hurt by her comment. For a moment, I was speechless and wondered if I was at fault. To ease the tension, I tried joking about how we had once wished to be pregnant together, and now it was somewhat true. She simply laughed dismissively, which hurt me even more. I don't know how to feel anymore. I am genuinely feeling isolated and foolish for sharing this with them since they seem to have ghosted me during a time when I needed support the most, and I cannot understand why. Story 4. I transferred schools, and now my father hates me. I am currently a junior in high school and attended my previous school since I started as a freshman. That school offered standard academic courses along with a vocational elective that could be chosen at the end of the freshman year. My parents selected this school for me because they hoped I would pursue a career similar to my father's. Initially, I agreed with their choice. I had many friends and everything seemed to be going well. However, as the year progressed, I began to be teased about my weight and other trivial matters. It became exhausting and I started to dread going to school. Fortunately, toward the end of the year, things improved as I selected my program and my experience became more enjoyable. By the time my sophomore year began, I had a fairly sizable friend group and a few close friends. However, I was also gaining weight. I stood at 5 feet 6 inches tall and weighed 215 pounds. Upon the start of school, I was content with my schedule, except for my elective program, which never interested me. I put up with it for a while. My teachers were aware of my disdain for the school, but encouraged me to stay, so I did my best to engage with it. I enjoyed my academic courses such as mathematics and science, but I never had any interest in my vocational education program. The work was not particularly challenging. It simply did not resonate with me. At the end of my sophomore year, I approached one of the other vocational educators to see if I could transfer to her program, but she informed me that it was too late to make that change. During the summer, I spoke with my parents about the possibility of switching schools, but they dismissed the idea right away. They insisted that I remain at my current school, and that was the end of the discussion. To persuade me to stay, they sent me to my favorite uncle's house 3 times that summer, suggesting that I would eventually come to appreciate the school. They told me that my uncle had initially disapproved of my father's career but later learned to appreciate it, and believed I would too. I admire my uncle greatly. He influences my musical interests, my fashion choices, and we share a similar sense of humor. When I discovered that my parents tried to enlist him to convince me to stay, I felt somewhat betrayed. He was aware of my true feelings about the school even before I confided in my parents, and I had expressed my desire to become a teacher in the future, an aspiration my parents consistently dismissed, claiming it was unrealistic. They were attempting to use him as a means to sway my opinion in their favor. As the junior year commenced, I found things to be quite pleasant. I managed to lose around 50 pounds since my sophomore year and now weigh 168 pounds at a height of 5 feet 9 inches. My schedule is enjoyable as well. I get to leave early on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Tuesdays and Thursdays require me to attend a triple period for my elective courses, which I dread. At this point, the issue is not with the teachers. My academic teachers continue to be my favorites, and my elective teachers are fine individuals. It is simply the content of the elective classes that does not appeal to me. Surprisingly, during the Christmas break, I finally managed to persuade my parents, after months of arguments and discussions, to allow me to transfer to a new school. The process was straightforward, and by the beginning of the second semester, I successfully enrolled at my new school. I have met numerous new people. My new school is approximately 8 times larger than my old one. The commute to my previous school took almost an hour and a half, while my new commute is only 25 minutes. I have been adjusting to my new environment for about 3 weeks now. My classes and teachers are fantastic. I have enrolled in my school's education and leadership program aimed at future educators, and I find it to be an enjoyable experience. Conversely, my parents have taken a more negative view toward me. My interactions with them have changed. My father, in particular, no longer communicates with me as he used to. His conversations now center around my perceived shortcomings when I plan to seek employment, or threats about damaging my belongings, like my computer or television, if I don't secure a job. This negativity has been persistent since I began at my new school. He appears to be perpetually angry and spends his workdays sleeping. I return home from taekwondo class around 8:30 p.m. when he is about to leave for work. There are no more "I love yous." Instead, He comments on how being late for school the following day could lead to serious consequences for me. Even on his days off, his demeanor is worse. He lounges on the couch all day, absorbed in his phone. Our arguments have led to significant tensions, including a broken bedroom door and a moment when he cut off my cell service. Even my mother, who was initially opposed to my transfer, thinks my father is being excessively harsh. He has expressed that he will no longer assist me with anything and has asked that I refrain from requesting help. The only person I rely on to discuss these matters is my girlfriend, but she is dealing with her own challenges, so I attempt not to burden her too much. Returning to my father, he now insists that I find a job since transferring schools. I dedicate time after school to taekwondo 5 days a week, and on weekends, I focus on completing schoolwork and projects I may have missed during the week. None of my friends hold jobs, and their parents do not behave like my father does. I cannot identify any issues he might be experiencing other than my recent transfer. I prefer not to work at this time, as I have a summer job lined up, and I want to concentrate on my studies throughout the school year. I will be taking the SAT next month, and I am concerned that taking on a job would stress me out and disrupt my study schedule. So, is it really so terrible that I am not keen on working right now? I am only 16 years old, and I would like to focus on other priorities at the moment. As previously mentioned, I already have a job arranged for the summer. I have always been told that my family consists of mariners, and that I would be the next in line to follow in their footsteps. Yet, since childhood, my dream has been to become a teacher, a wish my parents believed was nothing more than a fleeting fantasy. I feel as though my father has distanced himself from me, and while my mother is present, she doesn't seem fully engaged either. I also feel a sense of betrayal regarding my relationship with my uncle. I now realize that the reason for my visits to him last summer was to pressure me into remaining at my former school. Was it really such a grave mistake for me to transfer? I want to clarify that I love my life as well as my parents. However, I believe that my father requires time to adjust to my decision not to follow his career path. I want things to revert to how they once were, but I am uncertain about what to do or whether they will ever return to normal. Can anyone provide me with advice on this situation? I would appreciate any insights or opinions, and I would like to know if I am in the wrong. Thank you for taking the time to read this.